Roar!
Ew.
Chapter 15. Second Biggest Fear. While Princess Celestia was briefing the elements of harmony on their mission, Selena was driving nervously to Stephen's house. The previous 8 hours of picking up the slack for several co-workers that had suddenly quit had left her with tense shoulders and a need to vent her frustrations to someone. But as she crossed an intersection, her stomach sank the same way it might, in anticipation of a monster to grab a defenseless victim in a horror movie. Why was the drive giving her this feeling? A vision from 12 months ago played in Selena's mind. She'd never forget the way he contained his furiousness as he told her about how Damien had framed him at work, or how nervous he became as he explained how he might get demoted, or even worse, lose his job over this drama. Time flashed forward, and she remembered being as relieved as he was when the instant blew over, with the only consequence of a delayed annual pay rise. Then a couple of months later, when he told her of possibly getting promoted, should he do well at his next annual review. Since then he had doubled his efforts at work, possibly in an attempt to make up for the incident a few months prior. How can someone try that hard at something for so long and not get tired out? He must be feeling so stressed right now. The final piece of the puzzle snapped into Selena's mind, and the revelation caused her to gasp aloud. Stress can cause someone to feel tired all the time, or maybe even have bad dreams. Then they might get a short temper or have trouble focusing. All of which had been happening to Stephen over the last week. But the revelation came with a few new questions, such as, how could she help if she'd never seen a problem like this before? Would it be wise to confide her day's frustrations to Stephen? What if she accidentally added more stress to what he's already feeling? Yes, it all made sense now. It was because of these concerns together with Stephen's crankiness that was causing being with him to lose its usual pleasantness. Yesterday was the best example she could think of. She played back the memory of arriving for her usual after-work visit to find him silent, with an expression that made his eyes, while facing possibly unemployment, look bold and courageous by comparison. Although he acted like nothing was wrong, Selena could see through him, and wanted to know what could have been bothering him so badly. Why didn't he give her a direct answer when she asked? As her mind remembered the way he distanced himself from her, at her attempt to reach out, her adrenal glands remembered, in great detail, the shock and uncertainty of what to do next, and her heart remembered the ache caused by being denied. Perhaps she could have eventually found out what was wrong. Unfortunately, their visit was cut short by her parents calling and asking her to come home and visit with some relatives that had just flown into town. Or maybe it wasn't unfortunate, since it gave her a chance to separate herself from the situation and figure out if there was any way she could help. Perhaps she just couldn't handle seeing Stephen that way at all. Selena attempted to suppress another churn in her stomach by reminding herself of the conclusion she had drawn last night. Stephen just needed some time to himself to cool off. She also had a plan. First, she would have Stephen try some other video games with her. Then she'd sit him down and briefly tell him about her day, before moving on to getting whatever was bothering him off his chest while she made dinner. Then they would cuddle with a movie, and perhaps she'd spend the night and see him off to work in the morning. It was a foolproof plan, with a 100% success rate in the past. There was no reason to not have high hopes today. Would be better, so that there would be no reason to feel nervous. Hopefully. As soon as she exited the car, she was startled by the sounds of growling, pounding drums, and wailing guitars resonating from Stephen's house. What could possibly be going on in there? Stephen didn't like this type of music. Some of his friends did, but Stephen was the only other car in the driveway. So it wasn't likely he had other visitors. Even so, they never played music this loudly. Something simply wasn't right with this picture. Selena made her way to the door with a pounding heart. Reluctantly, she tested the knob. The unlocked knob turned in her hand, and the door cracked open. She peered inside, hoping to see Stephen right away, but he was nowhere to be seen. Forcing herself into the house, she slowly made her way from the mudroom and into the kitchen, with the loud music vibrating through the floor. There was no part of this that made sense. Was Stephen in trouble? What if someone was in the house, unwelcome? Selena shuddered to think about all the things that could imply, and what could happen if she got caught interrupting whatever was going on. She seriously considered turning around and coming back another time, as her feet carried her to the living room, almost against her own will. The first thing she noticed was Stephen dancing erratically about the room. He seemed to be favouring his right leg as he moved about. Stephen tried to sing along with the song, but horribly failed in his attempts to match the singer's distorted growl. The next thing Selena noticed was the state of the living room, which looked like a Tasmanian devil had gone through it. One of Stephen's chairs and a couple of lamps had been toppled over, and the floor was littered with wrappers of various candies and protein bars. Used plates, coffee mugs, and large energy drinks covered every flat surface. Scattered about the coffee table in front of Stephen's sofa was a case filled with energy shots, half of which had been opened and emptied as well.
Stephen, what's going on?
Selena had to shout over the music. Stephen snapped up straight and looked at her.
Hey Selena, how you doing? I've missed you. How are you doing?
He stammered, talking abnormally fast. His words just barely made it to her ears over the vicious music. In an instant, she was forced to scrap her whole plan and replace it with... She wasn't sure with what. But the first item on the new list was to rush over to the entertainment system and lower the music's volume.
Stephen, what's going on?
She asked once the floor had stopped vibrating.
Just dancing. Want to join me?
Stephen's eyes lit up and a grin came across his face.
Oh, I learned a valuable lesson about my inner child the other night.
He said as he wandered to the other side of the room. He was limping slightly.
Why are you limping?
Never mind that. Check this out. I went digging around in my old stuff and found this.
He pointed to 2 towers of marble-work toys that he had set up, one much taller than the other. The box was lying in an awkward angle on the stairs just a few feet away.
Watch this.
Stephen dropped a marble at the top of the taller tower. It went through a couple of low-resistance obstacles before dropping down a steep ramp piece. Arching through the air, the marble landed cleanly into a funnel at the top of the left tower, and continued to dance through a few slightly more impressive obstacles before landing in the bottom tray.
Isn't that awesome? It only took me one try to set that up. I could probably do something cooler, but I thought to myself, wouldn't this be even more fun with the love of my life doing it with me? So I waited for you. What do you think? Want to give it a try?
That's when Selena noticed the pick stuck in Stephen's afro. Why was that there? Granted, that might be a fashion statement for some people, but Stephen had never done anything like that before. Who was this man, and what did he do with her boyfriend? The second action item appeared on her plans for the night as "Stop your eyes from popping out of your head." Selena shook herself back to her senses and looked at Stephen as calmly as she could. She said,
Stephen, I want you to settle down and tell me what's wrong.
Nothing is wrong.
Stephen hastily replied. As Selena made her way over to him, candy bar wrappers crunched under her feet.
You're really bad at lying,
she said, as she reached up to put her arms around his neck. Stephen must have confused the gesture for an advance, because he went to put his arms around her hips. Before he could get a grip, she pulled his head down a few inches to eye level. Thick, red, and jagged lines were coursing through his corneas, while his eyes carried stuffed suitcases. A little grossed out, she let go of his head and grabbed the afro pick out of his hair as she took a step back.
Gosh, Stephen, when was the last time you went to sleep? And why is this in your hair?
She asked, showing him the pic before setting it down on a nearby coffee table.
Oh, whoops! I forgot I was doing that.
He chuckled. Selena's brow furrowed, with an unspoken question of how someone could forget that they were picking their hair while they were doing it.
Okay. What about my other question?
Stephen raised an eyebrow.
What other question?
Did he seriously forget? She asked him not 10 seconds ago.
How long has it been since you last slept?
She repeated. Stephen paused, and Selena could see him trying to forge an answer behind the bloodshot eyes. She could tell for a moment that he was going to try and lie again. However, his silence remained, and he considered another option. By the length of the pause, there must have been a lot to consider. Eventually he sighed and lowered his head.
I haven't slept in over a week,
he said in resignation.
What are you talking about? We fell asleep together twice last week.
Yes, but I wasn't really sleeping,
he said reluctantly.
That doesn't make any sense.
Remember those dreams I told you about?
Yes?
I figured out why I never feel like I've slept when I wake up. It's because I'm not really sleeping, and they aren't really dreams.
Stephen, you're scaring me.
It's all real, Selena. Remember when I told you how I got beat up? I woke up that morning with bruises all over my body.
Bruises? Are they still there?
They're almost gone now, because it's been a week.
Selena pressed her hands on Stephen's chest and turned him around and walked him to the sofa. After pressing on his shoulders, he sat down, and she knelt in front of him.
Let me see.
Stephen sighed and lifted his shirt.
The biggest ones were here and here,
he said, pointing to some spots on his chest. Selena ran her hand up his torso. She found 2 splotches where he'd pointed, but they were small and had such low contrast to his complexion that they took effort to see.
These could have been done by anything. You do realize you've been sort of clumsy the last week, right? Maybe you bumped into something. Plus, why wouldn't you tell me if you woke up with bruises?
I didn't want you to worry, but they were much bigger than they are now, I swear.
He lowered his shirt and lifted his left ankle up to her.
There's also the fact that 2 nights ago I fell out of a window and sprained my ankle. When I woke up, this was sprained too.
Selena, though she had no idea what to do, instinctively wrapped her hands around his left ankle. She gently moved the joint in a circle, causing Stephen to gasp in pain. She immediately released his foot, and it fell back to the couch. Without touching it, Selena looked even closer. She figured that an injured body part would have some sort of visible sign like a bruise, swelling, or loss of flexibility. That simply didn't appear to be the case here. However, the concern on Stephen's face was real. She had to think of something to say. She brought herself some time by sitting on the sofa with Stephen and pulling his head into her chest. He seemed to relax a little while she held him there and tried to think of what to do next. The song on Stephen's entertainment center changed to one with a very heavy drum solo opening.
I didn't know you liked this type of music.
I don't. It's loud, obnoxious, and I can't figure out why the singer is so angry.
Then why are you blasting it so loud?
Because I'll never be able to fall asleep like that.
Selena quickly stifled surprise and frustration before she said,
You've been keeping yourself awake?
Yes.
How long?
Technically, since yesterday morning.
Are you nuts?
Her voice shot up at Stephen before she could contain it.
How the heck do you even do that?
It's easy, sort of. I just have to eat a lot. Coffee stopped working, so I found that if I mixed it with energy drinks and energy shots, well, it tastes absolutely terrible, but it also makes me feel like the Energizer Bunny for a couple hours. I keep the music on really loud all the time, and I'm always dancing or playing video games or watching a horror movie. Then I discovered I still had Marbleworks. Doesn't that sound like fun?
At A big smile contradicted the tears forming in Stephen's eyes as he let out a painful-sounding giggle. Selina still couldn't think of anything. The only suggestion she could make was the same one that Stephen had so quickly shot down the last time she made. But she had to say something now or she might not be able to do anything at all.
Stephen,
she said quietly as she ran her fingers through his thick hair.
you need help. Now.
I know,
said Stephen. Selina felt hope for a moment.
That's why I'm glad you're here.
What?
You can help me stay awake until I have my next doctor's appointment, and we figure out how to stop me from going to Equestria.
With that, Selina was officially lost.
It's only a couple of weeks from now. We can do that, right? Then we can tell the Guinness Book of World Records about how much fun we had together. The current record is 11 days. I'm already at 7 or 8. Doesn't that sound fun?
His faked optimism was reinforced by the return of his pain-filled chuckle that almost caused Selina's stomach to turn over.
Stop!
Selina shouted. Stephen blinked a couple of times. The water in his eyes cleared up and he seemed to be back to his usual self. For a moment.
What's wrong, babe?
That's not what I meant by help, Stephen.
She said bluntly. They were silent for a moment, while the heavy music still played in the background. After a long pause, Stephen shot back up to his feet.
Oh no, I can't do that right now. My employee reviews are in 2 days. I just have to do good until then. If I go get help and tell them what's been going on, they'll put me in a straitjacket.
He almost shouted. That was it. All of the cards were on the table. Even as afraid as she was, there was no choice but to get him to hear her out. Otherwise, well, she wasn't certain what the alternative option was. That bridge would simply have to be crossed when she arrived there.
I don't think they'll commit you, Stephen.
She tried to reassure him.
But we do need to get you help soon. There's no way this can be good for you.
She grabbed one of the empty energy shots and held it up for Stephen to see.
Look at this!
She dropped it.
Look at all this candy and dishes!
She cried with her arms waving about, pointing to everything in the room.
You're already delirious! You can't do this for 2 more weeks!
Selina, I know it's hard to believe, but I'm telling you, Equestria is real. You've got to believe me. Think about the injuries I got.
The bruises could have come from anywhere. Your ankle could be in your head. You know, you think something happened so you start feeling it? Really, it seems fine to me.
Stephen was silent for a moment, then his brow furrowed at her.
Do you think I'm crazy?
Now Selina knew what it felt like to have a knife go through her heart. She almost answered right away, but her throat croaked up and stopped her from responding with her first thought. Her stomach tightened itself in knots, and her hands started quaking as she finally found the words and forced herself to speak.
I think the stress at work has gotten to you.
It was a compromise, but it would have to do for now.
I've been telling you that you need to take a vacation.
I know!
Stephen shouted, throwing up his hands in the air and turning around.
That's why I need to get through this without any interruptions.
He paced around the sofa and towards the kitchen. Selina followed him while he continued to talk.
Think about it. If I can get the promotion, I can take a vacation. I could take you with me. We could go to Hawaii and catch up on all the missed sleep without a single gosh darn consequence. But in order to get that, I really need your help right now. I know I look out of it right now, but believe me, I'm perfectly fine at work. It's when I'm home that I need all the help I can get to stay awake. Just until I can get the tests done and the doctors can fix me.
Selina reached out her hand to Stephen, stopping his pacing just at the threshold of the living room. A smile came across his face as he reached out for it, and she gently tugged him towards her.
I'm scared, Stephen. I'm scared for you, and I don't know what to do, which only makes me more scared. Please just come with me and we'll get you help.
Stephen's eyebrows lowered and his eyes became glassy before pulling away from her grip.
No,
He said plainly.
I can't do it.
His voice started to raise again.
Not when I only have a couple of days to go before I can make it all better. I can't risk going back to Equestria. It's too real and it's too dangerous.
Steven?
Selena begged.
I know it's hard to believe, but you gotta think.
His voice continued to rise.
I've never had any issues before!
She had lost him.
Steven, please!
Selena cried out. Steven hunched over and held his head in his hands.
No!
He took 2 steps to his right and then doubled back towards the hall.
For the love of all that is holy, I'm telling you, I'm not crazy!
Selena shrieked when Steven's fist cracked through his living room wall. She covered her head and ears with her arms as the shake jolted a coffee table enough to knock over a small picture frame, shattering the glass as it collided with the floor. The thick fog of exhaustion, fear and frustration cleared itself from Steven's mind when Selena's fearful shriek rang through his ears. His eyes were flooded with information on the current state of affairs, such as the disaster era that was his living room, and the sounds of the heavy metal disc he made that morning still screaming and cursing in the background. A stinging sensation in his hand prompted him to pull it from the wall and examine the reddening scrape of his foreknuckles. All of that paled in comparison to the heart-ripping feeling of Selena, with her forearms clasped over her head, trying in vain to hold back tears already streaming down her cheeks. She stuttered and gasped in between several sobs before choking out.
I'm sorry.
No,
he said as gently as he could.
I'm sorry.
He tried to reach out to her, but she pulled away with a start.
I'm sorry, but I can't handle it anymore. I just don't know what to do. I can't help you, Steven.
What are you saying?
Steven tried once again to reach out to her, but she continued to pull herself away. His stomach churned and his knees grew weak when he realized what he'd done, and that he was about to experience the second biggest fear he had during this whole situation. He knew he had it coming to him too, after that fine display of how well he could control himself under this type of stress. He had known he was susceptible to that. Why wasn't he able to stop himself now when it mattered most?
I'm sorry. I just can't handle this new you.
Steven tried reaching out to her once again.
Selena, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Please don't do this!
Selena practically leapt backwards to get away from him. She covered her face with her hands, but couldn't hide the sobs in her voice.
When you're back to normal, come find me. Until then, I just don't know what to do anymore. I'm sorry.
Selena's leaking dam burst. Bawling loudly, she sprinted out of Steven's house. Steven dropped to his knees. The remnants of his sprain shot up his leg and were thoroughly ignored.
Selena, please don't leave.
Steven repeated to himself as the sound of Selena's engine revving and tires screeching down the street stung his ears. Steven's stereo system blared. Steven shot to his feet and bolted to his CD player.
You're not helping!
He shouted, giving it a hard slap. The disc protested the abuse by skipping the first 2 notes of the next song. Steven responded by going back to the entertainment centre and simultaneously pulling every plug out of the wall, causing the outlet to spark. With that, he threw on his shoes and set outside his door for a long, painful walk. Without Selena, it wasn't nearly as relaxing or as enjoyable. Nevertheless, he didn't return to his home until it was time to get ready for work. And a howling thank you to my Patreons.